All right, Freddie, it's on you.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Federico Martinez Garcia Jr. And today you're going to be learning about the service desk mergers, our experiences, how it was in the past, things that we have seen throughout the years. And I'm co-presenting with Andrea, and she's going to be introducing herself in a little bit. So I have been working in libraries since 1998. And I started working as a student. I started then as a staff. And then now as a director of access services. So I'm going to let Andrea introduce herself.
Thanks, Freddie. Just so you know, people are saying that your volume is low. So I'm Andrea. I'm the Director of Access Services at Bowling Green State University. I've been in access services for around 10 years. And I have worked at both merged desks and desks that haven't been merged. I'm going to start out this conversation talking a little bit about the literature on desk mergers. I am actually working on a PhD right now, and my dissertation is on service desk mergers. So this draws a lot on the research that I've been doing to look at this phenomenon. So we will start this show. Okay, so we're going to first start by, come on, buddy, change. Oh, that's the wrong button. Sorry, technical issues.
I can do it for you.
Thank you, Freddie. Okay, so overview. I'm going to talk about the first three parts, the history, the cause and purpose of mergers, and then lastly, the outcomes from the mergers that I read about. And then Freddie's going to talk about his specific case and how they made it work. Could you give me the next slide, please, Freddie? All right, so the literature, and there's a lot. The first thing I want to talk about is, can you flip for me, Freddie, please? Thank you. So the first thing I want to talk about is a large overview of how mergers have happened. I should mention that this is primarily focused on academic libraries. That's what my research is on. I have worked primarily in academic libraries, and honestly, there's not a lot of information out there about public or special libraries. So we'll talk first about where and when mergers have happened. Institutions of all shapes and sizes have combined service points, but you most frequently see it in mid to large size libraries. Small libraries may have only have one service point because they have fewer employees. A likely reason for mid-sized universities to have a shared library or a shared service point in their library is because the staff is trying to balance meeting the general needs of college students and also looking at specialized services based on that library's unique services or holdings. So they're kind of doing a balancing act between basic and advanced services. The staff in these libraries are often just big enough to have people to cover the basics and a few people to do things that require more specialized duties. Next is why libraries are combining, or excuse me, what services are combining. It should go without saying that combinations of service points aren't new. Starting around the 1970s, and I'm sure earlier, libraries have been looking critically at their organizational structure. There are a multitude of service points possibilities in a library, so I'd like to take a minute, if you could in the comment box, let me know a generic name of a service point that's in your library or that you have gone to. So circulation reference are the ones that most likely come to mind, but what other ones can you think of? So I'm seeing a lot of information desk, research, circulation, interlibrary loan, user services, IT, that's a big one that's happening. Copy shop, that's a new one. Writing centers, learning commons, that's a big model that people are using right now. Media, that's another one, that's an important one. Post office, that's interesting. Is it the actual post office or is it like campus mail sort of thing, Linda? So those are all really good ones. I also want to kind of point out some of the ones that people don't think of besides the post office at Linda's library. One is periodicals desks, reserve desks, IT, microforms, map desks, things like security in the cafe, and even non-library departments can all be service points that our users interact with. So in general, over the course of literature, you see specialized desks like periodicals and DevDocs being merged or phased out first. So these collections maybe are de-emphasized because things are going online or they're just not a big part of the collection purpose of the library. And then later on, we start seeing a bloom of non-library services, things like the IT desk, the writing center. So they're coming into the library to assist students in a central location. And then we're also now really starting to see another reduction in service points going to this one desk idea. And it's often involving circulation and reference. So obviously some libraries are either ahead or behind that curve, depending on their size and collection. So that kind of brings us to who combines. So who is kind of a two-dimensional question. The first part of that being who, like which staff are being combined. And then the second part is who is deciding that a restructure is needed. So I'll start with who initiates the merger. In the vast majority of cases in the literature, the decision to restructure starts with the dean or the college leadership. I can't say how many abstracts I've read that start with the phrase, in 2000 something, this desk and that desk were merged. So the key to that phrase is that there's little indication of a staff-initiated change. Off the top of my head, there's only one article that comes to mind where it was staff-initiated, and that was a circulation desk supervisor asking for her staff to be cross-trained on reference. But that shouldn't be taken necessarily as a negative. So our deans and directors are responsible for the organizational structure of our institutions. It's their job to make sure the library is meeting the needs of the institution and its patrons. The decision to merge can be an amicable one between departments. They just need to be that decision just needs to be put into motion. I think that's probably me hitting the crackling is probably me hitting my headphones, so I apologize for that. So once the decision is made, typically by the dean or the director, the next step is typically committee work. So deciding how exactly this new service point will work is often left to the employees of those service desks. So sometimes the committee will be created and they'll be given a simple directive of merge this desk and that desk, or this desk, the reference librarians aren't going to work it anymore, figure it out. So, And that brings us to who gets to work at that new desk. So one of the landmark cases of rethinking a service point is the Brandeis model of the reference desk. So that was in 1993, I believe. And they used a tiered model to train graduate and students and paraprofessionals to work at the reference desk. Yes, I'm still on the history slide. So the librarians at the Brandeis Library were spending a lot of time working on technology questions. They were having to teach their patrons how to use CD-ROMs and use them to do database work. So by offloading the kind of technological problems, the reference librarians could focus more on complex questions. I'm not sure if this is when library employees began to argue about who was qualified to work the reference desk, but I'm sure it was a pivotal part in that conversation. I'm not going to get into that argument. It's not really the point of this, but I'd be remiss not to mention that mergers can have a negative impact on how library employees perceive their status. So we've covered the first four. I want to talk a little bit about how mergers happen. We've talked a little bit throughout. Usually the leadership of the institution decides to merge. They form a committee, and the committee plans it, and then it's put into implementation. I wanted to mention a key aspect of the merger that isn't very well discussed, which is the after. So the vast majority of literature on mergers are case studies about the first year or two of the merger process, and how the merger is functioning 5, 10, or 20 years later isn't often discussed. That lack of research is a big issue because it affects our ability to plan implementation. When planning a merger, I would suggest looking closely at why the change is happening and trying as much as possible to future-proof that decision. So next, I'd like to talk about why service points are merged. So the first one that comes up a lot is technology, specifically the changes in technology. So we saw that in the Brandeis model, where librarians were spending so much time teaching us patrons how to interact with CD-ROMs that they couldn't do a lot of their other work. You also see that in the rise of electronic material. So electronic material is often, or is hopefully, easier to access by our patrons. So there's less for staff to do as far as like the nuts and bolts of how to search for an article or a book. And that leads us to like changing user needs. So you can see on this graph, this is service trends in ARL libraries from the 90s to about 2015. And it's kind of small, but basically it says things like circulation and reference transactions are going down, but other things like interlibrary loan are going up. So students aren't needing necessarily physical things. They don't need necessarily to talk to a librarian, or at least they aren't doing it. But they still need access to information that the library doesn't have. There are also changes in higher education that can affect service desk mergers. First is the rise of support services. So things like the Learning Commons, things like, what are they called? You don't know. Number of group press. I think number of group present. So how many ACRL libraries reported on that, I believe is what it is, Maureen. Things like groups in dorms who are working on things, learning communities, that's what it was. All these sorts of things where librarians may be working with students not in a typically information literacy oriented way. And then another big part of that is pedagogy. So library instruction has evolved from really simple bibliographic instructions. This is where you click to download this article, and this is where you do that. And they're growing into things like embedded librarians and credit-bearing courses. So this is requiring a higher level of duties from staff to kind of support changes in higher ed, changes in technology, changes in user needs. You can really see that in the ACR information literacy standards. They used to be, like I said, very prescriptive. This is how you locate information. Now it's more, this is a big overview of how information literacy is, or information is created. And this is what you need to think about when you're reading articles. So like I said, this requires a repurposing of staff. An ARL report by Stanley Wilder in 2017 mentioned that there is an increasing need for functional specialists. So people like OER, support, IT, database maintenance, all things like that, where it's not the traditional services that we're used to. So we're drawing away staff lines from those, so we need to repurpose the staff. And then the next two are kind of ancillary parts. Budget is not an ancillary thing, but a lot of libraries are combining their desks because of budgetary issues, especially in the recession. I think it was in 2008. There just wasn't a lot of money going around, and one of the easiest ways to save money is to get rid of staff lines. So by combining desks, you don't need as many people out there. You can repurpose people and have an easier way to balance the budget. And then lastly, redesigns. I put ish after it because it's kind of a chicken and the egg effect. So I don't know about you guys, but whenever we start a weeding project at my library, suddenly campus is like, oh, we should put something in there. So is it really the desk is being redesigned, or the desk is being combined to cause a redesign, or is a redesign causing the desk to be merged? So that's kind of a chicken or the egg sort of thing for me. And then next are the outcomes of mergers. So there's a few different models, but they generally focus around these four on the side. Excuse me. So the first is elimination. So the service point is just completely gone. They get rid of it, and whatever duties they're performing at that desk, who knows what happened to them. This is typically things like the periodicals desk and the GovDocs desk, where they just don't offer that service anymore. Next is a shared desk, and that's specifically talking about pushing two desks together. So you have the same staff working the same duties, but they're just next to each other. So a reference half and a circulation half. Next is cross-training. So this can happen at a shared desk. It can happen at a desk that's not shared, but it is staff who are trained to do different sorts of duties to help patrons. And then lastly is this sort of on-call model, or a tiered model, where a group of people work at the desk, and if they have a question that doesn't really apply to them or is too advanced for their knowledge set, they will call in the service personnel that they need, or they can pull in someone to help. So obviously this is kind of implying, is that better, Tricia? Thanks. So this is implying kind of idea that this on-call method is the best method. I don't want to do that. I would instead say that you need to look at the purpose of the shared merger. If it is to better utilize staff, this can be a good model to use because it frees up staff to do other things, and it's still directly helping the patrons. But if all you want to do is put two desks together so you have more space somewhere else, a shared desk would work just fine. Next are kind of staff duties. So there's not a lot of evidence that people are being fired because of mergers or let go because two desks have combined. More likely, lines are just repurposed, and the hierarchy can sometimes get a bit taller. That's especially can happen especially when whole departments combine. So they have to have a desk manager, or they need a kind of middle manager between the chair and things like that. There's also sometimes a kind of a morale issue. So it's a hit and miss of whether it's positive or negative morale. Some libraries, there is a definite increase in job satisfaction. People have more time to do things that are key to their job. They like learning new skills. They are closer with their colleagues. But there's also this tension that can be caused. Obviously, you're combining two service points that means that you need to combine two different cultures. How I do this may not be the same way you do that. And also, if you're combining departments, then that could be a big issue of who is allowed to do different things. And then something that's not talked about a lot, but I find very interesting, is what happens to the student workers when a desk is shared. So we may not need them as many students to work it, but it's hardly ever mentioned in the literature. And then lastly is assessment. So it's hard to point out what the outcomes of mergers are because there's not a real good set of data about the outcomes. Obviously, everyone has different reasons for merging desks, but often they measure it in like how many transactions did they do and what was the gate count. And so it's hard to see assessment coming that's meaningful to the reason they combined a desk. And then lastly, I kind of want to pause for an information literacy aspect on this. So a lot of this literature is written by librarians, and often the institutions are named in these case studies. So it brings a question of what are we missing? Whose voices are we hearing? And are they telling us everything? Because obviously they don't want to air their dirty laundry in this public kind of forum. And there's also a well-known bias in research that positive results are more easily published than negative ones. So I just want to point out that even the literature is probably not giving us the whole story of what's happening in these mergers. And then lastly, before I turn it over to Freddie, I kind of want to do a plea for myself as a person who's researching this. So the literature right now is saturated with case studies. If you want to write about a merger, I have some gaps that I found that I think would be really great things to investigate. One of the first things is there needs to be quantitative assessment that is generalizable. There's so many case studies, it's hard to apply what happened there to what can happen in another situation. Some of the quantitative things that could be assessed are the impact on staff morale, what duties are changed, how are the relationships between staff affected, doing actual meaningful assessment instead of our gate count went up by 20. What does that mean? Is it actually addressing the purpose of the merger? And then 5 years later, a lot of the literature is the first 2 years of the merger and kind of preliminary results of how it went. There's not a lot of things that happen after they decide to merge. I did recently attend the Access Services Conference, and I saw a presentation about what happens when the shared desk is no longer shared. So at this library, it's only Access Services working the desk, and they also took on custodial and security duties at the desk. So it was very interesting to hear their story about how they dealt with these extra duties and also managed the expectations of other employees in the library. So the reference staff would say, oh, you need to be teaching your students how to do this better. So how do they balance that? That was very interesting. And then lastly, like I said, there's not a lot of information out there on public libraries. So if you're a public library and you're doing a merger, it will be great for you to add to that conversation. All right, so I will turn it over to Freddie.
Thank you, Andrea. Can you hear me better now? Please let me know if my volume is too low or anything. I think that I figured out what was going on. Okay, so thank you everyone for being here again. So I'm going to present to you a case study that I did when I was working in one of my libraries. And this case study was gave me a lot of information for me to be able to be the project manager of merging 3 desks. And it was really a good kind of bonding time for everyone in the library. So if you have a chance to kind of just look at this and then include everyone in the library, give everybody a voice, this can be really good. So let me start with the description, a little bit of a background information. So I used to work at the Arizona State University in downtown Phoenix campus. This was in 2011 when I did this merger there. So the campus is an urban campus. It's right in the heart of the downtown Phoenix. It is the second largest, or it was the second largest in 2011, after the Tempe campus with 17,000 students. The campus is located in an area that is surrounded by multiple transient housing and across from the city transit station. And so it is just things that you have to be keeping in account when you are looking at anything. It's like just how it is, the university, and also how your library is. So in this library, it was a library that was open to all. It is a public university, so we remain open to the public. And it is one single story library that is located all the way in the basement. And it was the collection that we had, the printed collection, it was not as big as other libraries. It was really condensed. It was really specific, just to provide more study spaces for all the students. So one of the things that we started kind of looking there, it was how the library's desks were providing services. So we had 2 desks, and we had the information and reference desk that it was called the IC desk. That desk was right at the entrance of the library. It was pretty small. It was only for one person to be sitting there. It was close to the student computers, and then it was also close to the study rooms. And then we had another desk that was all the way in the back. It was on the opposite side of the library, and it was away from the entrance. It was a really huge desk. It could hold about 4 to 5 people at the desk to be working at the same time. And so it wasn't too accessible. And so, but it was the biggest one, and it was all the way in the back. So I started also looking at all the transactions, the type of transactions that we were doing at that desk. So if you look at the maroon color, that is the service desk, and that is the one that was all the way at the back. And then the IC desk is the one that was right there at the entrance, right at the front, the small one. So when you look at that, the numbers of transactions that we were getting at the smaller desk, that it was just one person, it was a lot higher than what was going on in the other one that we have multiple people working at. So when you see the total and you see both of the columns together, you see how much of a difference of the service that we were providing in those, and also think about the number of people that I have working on those 2 desks. So this one is just another image of a transaction. That is the gold area, that is all the students' questions. The maroon, it is all staff and faculty. And the gray was all the public, the general public that was coming into the library. They were not part of the university. So you see that at the IC desk, again, the one that is right at the entrance of the library, we were answering more students' questions than public. We also had a few number of faculty and staff asking questions at that desk. When you see the pie chart for the service desk, there was the farthest one, the bigger desk, you see that the majority of the questions that we were getting there, those were for non-university affiliates. So we were providing one person, one staff, being able to be at that desk to help everyone that was coming, or the majority of the people that was coming to the library. Right at the front with one, and then we have multiple people all the way in the back providing the majority of the assistance to those that were not part of the university. So when you see the numbers, when you start looking at everything, every detail, type of questions that you get, type of patrons that you get, type of assistance you provide, you start realizing, like in this case, in this library, we really needed to make a change. So some of the challenges when you're thinking about it, making any type of change in your library is going to be the support, because everything is if you don't work together, it's not going to be functional. It's not going to be successful. It's not going to get you anywhere. And then also, like Andrea was talking about, the budget. Every time that you introduce something new, you're always going to be looking at numbers. That is a number sign that you see right away. And then after that, you see if people are going to be agreeing with it or not. So at the beginning, when you're doing all of this transition, it's going to be expensive. I'm not going to tell you that it's not going to be expensive at all, but the way that everybody has to be thinking about, or the way that you have to be talking to those that you want to be getting on your side about this change, it is presented in a way that it's going to be expensive at the beginning, and then later it's going to be getting cheaper. You're actually going to be getting whatever you spend it on that change, you're actually going to be getting it back. You're going to be seeing savings there. So some of the outcomes that I saw on this change, it was that we needed to be doing cross-training. So the desk had, it was, when I was putting all those together, it was circulation, reference, and technology. All of those three areas came together in one desk. We had still technology being sitting at that desk, and they also learning some basics about what was to be doing circulation. In reference to research assistants, they were able to refer to anyone that was more trained on how to provide reference to the students. So also we got we got everyone in the library collaborating, creating this type of competency tiers. So we had the basic tier that it was for the expectation for all the student workers at the beginning. You know, it's just directional circulation services, which is sometimes most of the questions that you get at your desks. And then we went to, okay, getting to the medium. When people have a little bit more experience working in the library, when they've been spending there a lot of time, they're getting a lot of the roles that are in the basic under control, then they go up to a training when they start providing or learning about how to provide a little bit of the start of the research assistance. Then you get to the high staff, the high competency in the tiers. And that is going to, including the medium, including the basic, plus doing the short one-shot research instruction while providing reference services. So remember that all of this different tiers is including the one that was before. So because everybody was part of that, the first tiers, when we're creating that document, everybody understood what the expectations were, and everybody understood that if they needed any type of training, they needed to be getting that training under control. So we needed to start providing that and also assess type of the performance of the desk. There was also a referral system. So whenever there was a research question, that some people were spending sometimes up to 5 to 10 minutes at the desk, and then you start getting a line of people coming in. you needed to be making a decision to refer that person to a librarian. I know that it's difficult sometimes for people to make that decision, to feel comfortable saying, oh, I'm sorry, I cannot help you anymore. I'm going to have to refer you to someone else. That's why we needed to give a time frame that if they were spending for 5 to 10 minutes, that is too much time that you're taking from that person. And if you're just going around and around and around, and what you're finding is better for that person to go to the specialist. In technology, we cross-train everyone in doing the troubleshooting in technology. It was just the basic type of computer software, how to sometimes just turn on and turn off the computer. And then also some training about the assistant technology that we had in the library. So if we had any type of read out loud software, people were getting trained on that. If technology was being introduced to assist those students with disabilities, but everybody was getting trained on that. We were not, the goal, it wasn't to continue referring as much as we were doing in the past. It was that we wanted to be able to provide this service as soon as we could. So the outcome also, it was the one-stop for everyone, for all library users. They were just coming to that desk and they were able to get what they were looking for. A lot of us, when we are in college, and when we were in college, time is a premium. We need to go in and get out most of the time. If you're in between classes, running everywhere, and you need things, it's one of the things that they look at this desk, and it was just one stop. They didn't have to go everywhere and spending minutes going from one side to the other. So we did a survey, and 80% of the students say that their satisfaction, I mean, not 80% of the students, but the satisfaction of the students went up to 80%. And that was amazing, that it was almost double the number, how they felt about coming into the library and getting that type of service. It decreased also the desk coverage. So in the past, like I was saying, we had that front desk with one person, and the back there was from 4 to 5 people most of the time. So you had up to 6 people sitting on the desk. Well, we had this one, we have 3. So it went to half. And that was, we have 3 only on the times that was really busy. Let me see, I'm looking at a question right here, and it says, which desk did the services combine to? Front or back? So we moved all the way to the front because that was the location that was getting a lot of questions, a lot of traffic, a lot of transactions done. So that was the best area to have that desk. It also gave us the chance to have an area, or to designate an area to have open holes and interlibrary loan shelves. So a lot of people they were really getting really stressed out about this idea when I was introducing that. But it was right next to the desk. It's not a browsable type of collection. You had the last name and the first initial. Then it went to just initials, and everybody was just thinking that it was a good deal. There was not a lot of information shared. We were not losing any books. We only happened to miss one book, and it was someone that needed that book. They had a hold on it and took it, but forgot to check it out. But it was just one occasion. It was completely opposite of what everybody was thinking about. Let me see, it says, how did it work with circulation on the back? It was really inconvenient. Before we assigned a desk to be just at the front, because everybody was asking about it. All the people that were coming in saying that the desk in the back was too far away. We had to trust that everyone that was going through the gates, and they will make the alarm go off, that they will come back and then go to the desk and then ask what was going on. With the privacy issues, like I said, it is just the way that they do it in some of the public libraries. I think that right now they're using more numbers that identifies with the person in a public library. In this library, we were using the last name and the first initial. And again, it wasn't a browsable collection. So whoever wanted to go and start just looking who was checking out whatever, because it was right next to the desk, we were able to step in and just ask them what is it they were looking for, if they had anything that was supposed to be at that shelf. If not, then we will share with them that I was in a browsable collection. We did not have security cameras at all. It was something that we had conversations in the library, but the expense was going to be too high. And then there was a lot of concern about, again, the privacy, keeping all of those recordings and all that. So it was getting to a different level. And the university and the library decided not to do that. Yeah, the users that were pulling the holds that were pulling like interlibrary loans from the shelf, if it was a hold that they had under their name, we had a self-checkout machine right next to it. So they were able to check out the hold. The interlibrary loan request, they had to come to the desk, again, that it was just right next to it. And they had to be, we had to be checking those items out for them. No, we always had a staff at that desk. That was the only desk that was in the library. The one that was in the back, the bigger one, that was removed. And we actually increased the footage of the study areas in the library. So we only had the one in the front. So every single hour that the library was open, we had people working at that desk. There was a budget savings during this remodel of the desk. And also it created an inclusive work environment because again, everybody was involved in all of this change. Everybody was involved in creating the documents. Everybody was involved in creating the expectations. So everybody felt part of it. And so it created that everybody felt that they had the knowledge as anyone else that they probably in the past didn't even know that they knew how to do. And so it created this really good inclusive work environment. So in the library budget savings, we had librarians in the past at the desks there at the front, the one that was right at the entrance of the library. And we had all of the staff and the students all the way in the back. So it was 6 people that were working there. When we transferred to the front, when we transferred to the new desk, I had only 3 people. Librarians were not sitting at that desk. They were only getting referrals anytime that there was any need for research. And so they were able to do something else, something outside, something that it will be probably that if we kept the same model, probably will require the library to hire another librarian or another staff to be able to provide the service that it will be going and teach classes, connecting with the faculty, going to the meetings, creating that type of report with everyone in the university. So at the beginning, just thinking about the students, which was the one that I was looking at that everybody was more concerned about, it was for the students' budget. We had a saving of $16,000 just on that. On the first, we did that as soon as we transferred, how much money we were saving on students' budget. Staff, they had the same, we kept the same number of staff, but they were able to participate in things outside of the library. They were able to connect and participate with other departments and things that were that they wanted to be participating in. They were feeling more connected with the university. Let's see, another question. It is, do you get any pushback by the users? The only pushback that we were getting, it was the users that were the public users, because in some occasions, they told us that the students were too annoying and they should not be allowed to be in the library as much. And it was because they were getting too comfortable in the library. But the students and the faculty and the staff that was working in the library, the administration, they look at the different type of things that it was going to be changing. One of the most important, it will be budget. And the other one is, you need to explain to me exactly what the expectation is going to be. That they felt really good about it. They actually embraced that idea, and they helped me, and they facilitated a lot of things for me to be able to complete this project. We reduced the number of students to half of the number of students that we had in the past, just because now we only needed half of the students to be working in the library throughout the hours that we were open. The faculty, it was the ones at that university, at that specific campus, even though they were really connected with the university, they were a little bit they kept everything for them. If they didn't like something, they would tell you right away. If they do like something, most of the time they didn't tell you. But if they didn't say anything, that was the good things to do. I mean, that was a good sign. Let me see, I'm reading these questions right here. The staff work at the desk have other duties while not at the desk. Yeah, so they were able to, they have more time to be processing the interlibrary loan, because everything was in the same library. We had to be processing interlibrary loan. We have to be processing any type of holds. We have to be serving in some committees to be able to perform or complete the goals for the university and the library. So they had that time to be able to complete all that, because most of the time what they were doing, they were bringing their work to the desk, and they were paying more attention to the work that they have to be doing instead of the work that they could be doing at the desk, that it was just paying attention to everyone. Well, the circulation desk, it was more of the services that were with, let's see, less students. Yeah, so it was less students. While we always have one staff every single hour that we were open. It was staff, student, and another student. Well, actually, 2 students and 1 staff that was working at that desk. So they all were providing the service. So throughout all this planning, again, I included everyone in the conversations. And whenever there was any type of update for those that were not present, we always make sure to have those meetings and present to everyone what the decisions that were being made, including the physical location, the layout, how everything was going to be better for the library, the users, and the staff as well. So everybody was included. Yeah, so the librarians are the ones that were contacting everyone. And again, if it was something good that was going on in the library, they will not say anything. But if it was something bad going on in the library, then we got all this flow of questions, complaints, comments. And in this case, not everybody was expressing how good it was, but at the same time, they would never complain about it. So it is one of those situations that you just need to make a decision how to take that. So the referrals to the librarians for complicated reference questions with that, those type of referrals, it was that you will talk to the person that you were helping at the desk, and you would tell them that it was better for them to be contacting a specialist. Once you did that, you called the specialist, because we had the librarians there, and they decided to have some type of a schedule that they were going to be available to be taking consultations.
So we would call them, we gave him kind of like an idea, what is it that we were working on with the student, what type of things we were trying, what was working, what was not working. And then that way, that student didn't have to start all the way from the beginning when they get to the librarian's office. So in that library, we had it was about 25 people. 25 people that were involved in the process in one way or another. So whenever it was something that was related to like a reference, providing reference, the first ones that were contacted with the librarians, how they felt about it, how to create a document that was going to be good for everyone. And then after that, it was presented to the staff. Then the staff had to be given the feedback. It is a long process, but everybody, again, everybody was included, everybody had a voice. How you track transactions? So we in that library and also in my current library, we're using a software that is on our computers where you start recording all the transactions that you do at the desk. And so you just define exactly what is it that you're looking for, what type of transactions you want to be taking in account. Because there are some numbers that we have to be reporting in certain reports that are for all the libraries. And libraries outside of the university, you know, like we all report annually all the transactions that we have done. But also within your own library, your local library, you can modify that and add all the things that you are thinking that are important for your library to be keeping track on. So the chat service, that was something that we had to keep away from the from the library desk, because that desk, it was mainly to help everyone that was coming to a library. If we were hours, for example, hours that were later on the day, there was at night, there was that we had identified as not a high traffic time, people at the desk were able to chat, to do the chat service. But when not, there was someone else assigned at their own desk to be doing the chat. Because when you are helping someone, you need to be devoted to that person. You have to be doing the searches they're looking for. And having just 3 people at that desk, it wasn't feasible for anyone to be helping 2 people at the same time, or having someone on hold for a long time when someone else will be helping them. Scheduling. So the scheduling desk, I was the one that was I was the access services manager at the library, and I was the one that was doing the scheduling for everyone. I will send the librarians just the hours that they were available for them to sign up for when they wanted to be on call, and they took care of that. I was just giving them the hours. The software that I was using for scheduling, it was actually just Excel. It was nothing complicated. We didn't have to be spending any money on scheduling. It was just Excel. And I'm talking about 2011. At this time, in my current library, we're using Outlook. We created just a desk, a calendar there that we share with all the students, all the staff, and anybody knows what they have to be here. They get reminders. That is right now just using Outlook. So the assessment was performed at the end of every year. So this was in 2011. I left there in 2014. So we were able to collect data for 3 years, and during those 3 years, it was the only thing that we had to kind of make changes on. It was kind of like the training or the retraining on some of the assisting technology, because it was rare that someone was going to come and ask anyone for assistance. They were able to do everything on themselves, And but whenever we had someone new, that was the time they would come to the desk to ask for any type of instruction or assistance with that type of technology that was so specific for them. So for cross training, the first thing it was to talk to everyone about the cross training. We needed to define exactly what type of cross training you need to be given. And before doing that, you need to know what the level of knowledge that you have in your staff. Because you don't want to be training someone all the way from the bottom if they already know something about computers. So we had a questionnaire that it was submitted to everyone, and then they were able to define what was it that was that we were looking during that cross training. So depending on the answers, depending on what we identified that was the right answer, or the wrong answer, or the very basic answer, we were following up with meetings with them and just asking them, based on this question, based on this answer, it seems that you know how to do this. So the cross training, it also took time, but that was the best way for us that we identified at that specific moment for that specific library, that it was the most effective one. There are libraries that are going to be bigger. You're not going to be having a lot of time to talk to a lot of people at the same time, or just in a week or 2 weeks. So there is where you're going to have to make a decision based on your location, your library, and your desk and your staff. Yes, so every time that we had the librarian sign up for any type of hours, they will send me an email with the Excel sheet, and I would share that with everyone. If there was any type of change, I would communicate that change to everyone. And so it is not that we were keeping track of what the librarians were doing, if they were available or not, or anything like that. It was just for everyone to know who was available at the time that someone was looking for help. Okay, so one of the things just to mark here about the making it work, everything it was the support. You know, you have to be having everybody understanding what you are doing. You have to collaborate with everyone. You have to include everyone so they can feel that they are part of it. So that they, not just that they feel, but they are part of it. In the means of cost and all that, you have to be able to reuse some of the items that you have already if you are merging two desks together, or just to reimagine, like what is it that we have here that is extra, and they just kind of reimagine that. And then you also have to be continuously assessing. Like I said, in my library, it was just the assessment that it took once a year that we were doing this. And also you have to listen. You have to listen to your staff. You have to listen to your student workers, to the students coming to the library, to administration, to yourself. You have to be listening to everyone and really value that type of comment or anything that you get from anyone. You have to be embracing any type of change that you make. You have to embrace that our purpose to be in this library, our priorities are the students that we help, are the public that we help, is anyone that comes to the library to use our services. We need to embrace that. We need to understand that. And anytime that there is any type of change, anything to modify, just think about it and see if it is the right time to do it. And if it is not the right time to do it, just say why it's not that time to do it. And you're gonna be doing great on that. Who determines the learning outcomes and review assessment of the library? That was the leadership committee at the beginning, but then again, it was something that was, because that assessment touches a lot of different departments in the library. At the end, everybody was getting an input. I'm not saying that everybody was in a meeting, all of them talking. They were meeting unless if there was something bigger to be discussing about. But if it was something that it was just communication, something that it was sharing about, should we be assessing the circulation that we do in the library? Should we be assessing the type of reference that we're providing? If you look at all of those, the specific things that you're assessing, you have to be talking to those that manage those areas, those departments. So that's what we were doing. So it seems that it's already 3 minutes after the hour. So I just wanted to end the presentation with this. Here are some further readings that we have, that we gathered for you. Just if you're interested, if you want to go back and read something about it. And now I want to open it for questions. Let me see. And it seems that I got all the questions. I hope that I answered most of them. Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah. So it is. If you have any questions in the future, you can email me or Andrea if you have any questions about this presentation, and we'll be happy to reply to you. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Okay, like I said, if you have any more questions later on the day, if you think of anything, just send us an email. And thank you for everything.
Hi, Lois. This is Derek. I think we can stop recording now.